Hello and welcome. This recording is Being Life-Wide, a case study of empathy-based pedagogy enhancing learning journeys in the workplace. It's a group presentation across 4 institutions and working environments exploring learning, life and work. I'm Whitnall. I'm the Equality and Diversity Lead for the Learning Teaching Enhancement Centre at the University of Salford. I'm presenting a group paper on behalf of Louisa, Lucy, Rachel and myself. This presentation explores case studies of different learning environments in academia and healthcare. The environments are both places for learning and working, places of life, research and teaching. The separation between life and work are increasingly blurred, and these impact not just on how learning happens, but also how learners engage. The environments are King's College Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, Royal Marsden Hospital, the Middletown Centre for Autism and the University of Salford. In this recording we will explore 2 themes through lived experience: the collective experience of practitioners as learners and our journey of unpacking and deconstructing the concept of learning for learning's sake, how we formed our community of practice to shape and influence our learning and teaching practice, and also focus on the impacts of empathy and compassionate-based pedagogies in the workplace, learning through 4 case studies, each in a different professional setting. Let's now explore the collective experience of practitioners as learners and our journey to shape and influence our learning and teaching practice. As a collective, we met through continued professional development and experiencing quickly recognised that we had similar challenges in our learning and teaching practice. These challenges included: how do we engage the learners? The common space we occupied is that we were training, teaching and developing the experts in a professional setting. Learning needed to be compassionate, economical, our learners had limited time and needed to be immersed in the learning, and the learning had to take place or be connected to the work environment. This contextualisation was really important. Focused on the context of work-based learning, the journey of empathy-based proactive practitioner was unpacked, and through that discussion we found ourselves creating a community of practice. As we began to explore more inclusive approaches and empathy-based models, the boundaries of learning, work, life became increasingly blurred. We're learning all the time, simply. Navigating the blurred lines of learning, life and work that form key concepts in practice-based approaches was helpful, and some of those are explored in this presentation. We found ourselves in messy spaces and moving across boundaries, embracing challenges and developing approaches to structure learning to enhance development that's life-wide, as well as skills in the workplace and skills for life. These were some of our key learnings that we'll share during this presentation. We explored empathy in learning and teaching in more detail. So what does this look like in professional environments? Utilising universal design for learning and both the learner and teacher lived experiences of empathy-based pedagogy, 4 examples of practice across 4 different environments. We shared using a group model of peer review and peer observation. As part of this process, each practitioner shared their aims as a teacher and lived experiences as a learner. This helped each of us to develop an approach that was contextually relevant and drew on 2 common approaches of universal design for learning, UDL, and empathy-based pedagogy. Universal design for learning and lived experiences of empathy-based pedagogy were based on Sanger Nelson and CAST.org definitions. UDL is a form of inclusive pedagogy and provided a useful framework to explore empathy and compassionate pedagogies that were critical to embodying the lived experience and interlaced in the environments and experiences of our learners, ourselves as practitioners, and ourselves as learners. Furthermore, it was important that the approaches were intentionally inclusive and facilitated learning for a diverse audience and specifically neurodiversity. UDL draws from a variety of research. The model was used and we took from cast.org, which you'll see the reference at the end of this presentation, and their guidelines of engagement, representation, action and expression. The focus of this was scaffolding with graduated release, providing signposting and support and gradually tapering this as learners' confidence increases. UDL is often the basis for design of learning environments, particularly those in health and education settings, and further underpinned the contextualising of this work and learning supporting empathy that connects into life. So let's explore this through the 4 case studies of learning, life and work, each in the context of a professional learning setting, drawing out the learning and impacts of each approach. In case study 1, we observed sensory differences in the classroom environment as an evidence-based approach. In this case study, Rachel used evidence as her underpinning for her work. It resonated through the learning materials, both in the format and presentation, and drew from informed evidence bases to influence and shape thinking of the learners. She did this through leading by example, modelling expectations. Even the presentation, the slide deck, resonated those key pieces of learning. Drawing from own practice, publications and practical knowledge really embodied the lived experience, and this also meant that the learning was very, very relevant to those experiencing it. In her learning, life, work, delivery of teaching, different models and illustrations identified the desired practice, and this was brought together through relevant imagery to progress the learning. Also, the choice of colours, background, uncluttered slides were helpful in supporting students, particularly those with neurodiverse needs. And by drawing on evidence, including her own research, autism and managing anxiety, practical strategies for working with children and young people, for example, really helped ground each piece of learning throughout that learning journey. In case study 2, this was an introduction to cranial nerves, and very specifically the language of learning was explored and presented in different formats. In this case study, Louise was able to deliver complex concepts through visual, written and audible language cues to support understanding through these different formats. The visual language, the written language and the audible language. In her learning, life, work, delivery of teaching, this meant embedding the technology of media, using things like YouTube videos that explain and explore, providing background, and also impact as to why this learning was important. The clear use of diagrams and mnemonics to remember the 12 cranial nerves was carefully created and developed to maximise the learning in the limited time available. It was complex, but it didn't feel complex. It didn't feel like too steep a learning curve from a student perspective. And this was critical to make the complex easy to digest. In case study 3, we looked at newborn screening examination of the eyes. And this was a really interesting approach of scaffolding the learning as a process. In this case study, Lucy provided scaffolding through the 4 C's. These were connections, constructive alignment, continuity, challenging assumptions for clarity. In her learning, life, work, delivery of teaching, the learning starts before the scheduled lesson with some pre-work. She sets out the work and how it connects with the learning at the start, so from the journey of the pre-work straight into the classroom. Constructive alignment is used in the development of resources throughout the learning journey, and we see this threaded through from the pre-work, in session and recap at the end. The beginning of the session also identifies the continuity, how this connects and interconnects with other sessions and the student's prior knowledge, ending the session with a summary of future work and how that connection may continue. Challenging assumptions for clarity was important, so for example asking questions as we go to check knowledge. Does anybody know what congenital cataracts are, for example? So setting examples and questions through a question and answer technique was really helpful here. And unpacking the what, why and how, revisiting these in the narrative throughout and concluding towards the end. Case study 4. This was benefits of mentoring, creating safe spaces for learning. And ending the 4 case studies, this is my own practice. In this case study, I focused on creating a safe space for learning whilst delivering a session on mentoring. The account focuses on safe spaces developed through trust, being authentic and comfortable in this space. In my learning, life, work, delivery of teaching, the safe spaces were created by empowering and enabling permission to share and explore in a safe space, setting out rules of engagement, creating that safe space, talking about things like confidentiality and that all voices are heard and respected, facilitating opportunities to feedback, to contribute anonymously, for example through Padlet rather than through Teams or Zoom chat. Authentically being you, I disclosed my neurodiversity, lent into my vulnerability and shared as others did in the room, which was really helpful to create that sense of trust and enablement. So what are the key takeaways from the case studies? Well, in supporting learning, life and work in a professional setting, each case study took a different approach. Modelling exemplar practice, leading by example and using an evidence-based approach was really important. Utilising language, the visual, written and audible to make learning memorable and facilitate the learning of concepts that were complicated. Scaffolding the learning, presenting this as a process with clear connections that are constructively aligned and challenge assumptions. And then creating a safe space for learning to encourage sharing and supporting through trust. In summary, learning, life, work happens through a variety of lenses, and we've explored some of this and its application across diverse workplaces and learning environments. These are places of life whereby the learning journey is not simple or isolated, but often complex and ingrained. In this series of case studies, we present our reflections of using an empathy-based approach through the lived experience as students, teachers, practitioners, and most critically as human beings. Sharing practice through this unique and supportive community we've developed hasn't just supported us as learners, but in turn really enhanced our practice as teachers. And that's the critical takeaway from this learning experience. Finally, the references used in this presentation. I would just like to end at that point there and thank you for your attention.